Ooh, this will be fun. So, at the time I post this video, it will be my 26th birthday, and I want to do something a little bit fun this year, a little bit different, and talk about my favorite movie from every year I've been alive. Now, this is not an idea I came up with. I can't take credit for this. I've seen it all over YouTube. A bunch of YouTubers have done this idea. I believe the first person to do it, or at least the first person I saw do it, was Sean Chandler from Sean Chandler Talks About, so all the credit goes to him for coming up with this idea, and I thought it'd be fun, so I thought I'd try it for myself. And without further ado, let's start with the year that I was born, which is 1996. And there's a few options here. I certainly could have given it to Scream, which kicked off my favorite horror franchise of all time. It is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It gets better and better every time I rewatch it. Super rewatchable. Very clever, very inventive, very funny, scary, ahead of his time. Great twists. And then another one I thought about putting there is Mission Impossible. The first one, I think this one is very underrated. People love the recent ones with the big action sequences and stuff, which that stuff is great. But I also really enjoy the smaller scale crime thriller, spy thriller, which is the original Mission Impossible. But that being said, my number one for this year has to go to Primal Fear. One of the most underrated movies ever made. Great performances all around. Ed Norton, Richard Gere. Ed Norton gives possibly his best performance ever. And I believe it's also his first feature film, so that's just incredibly impressive. And it's a super compelling and well-paced courtroom drama. Honestly, one of my favorite courtroom dramas. Some twists and turns throughout. One of the best ending twists I've ever seen in a movie. If you've not seen Primal Fear, go check it out. It's so good.
I speak, you do not speak. Your job is just to sit there and look innocent.
Well, I am innocent.
That's it. That's exactly how I want you to look.
1997, this was an easy one for me. It's Good Will Hunting. This is not a movie that is going to blow you away conceptually or have these big twists or have you on the edge of your seat, but it does basically everything right. The characters are great, the performances are great, the emotions really hit, the character arcs are phenomenal. It's funny when it needs to be funny, serious when it needs to be serious. Everything about this, Robin Williams, Matt Damon, all their interactions are great, and they kind of learn from each other and help each other a little bit. The side characters are great. So much to love about this movie. The romantic storyline. So many quotable lines in this movie, like, how do you like them apples? Or, gotta go see about a girl. Such a well-done movie. Good Will Hunting is my favorite from that year.
You like apples?
Yeah.
Well, I got a number. How do you like them apples?
1998. Now, before I say my number one, I'm going to give a quick shout-out to Fallen, which is one of the most underrated movies ever, in my opinion. It's my favorite Denzel movie. It is a super compelling, psychological crime thriller with a supernatural aspect. One of Denzel's best performances and one of his most nuanced characters. The movie takes a direction you don't really expect. Several twists and turns, and it keeps you engaged all throughout. Disturbing, intense, super underrated movie. But my number one has to go to Saving Private Ryan. I'm not a massive fan of war movies, but this is probably my favorite one as far as like non-period piece sword and sandal war movies, like Braveheart. As far as like traditional types of war movies, it's my favorite. It is incredible. The opening scene is one of the best and most disturbing and violent and gruesome opening scenes of any movie ever. Does the rest of the movie not live up to that opening scene? Maybe a little bit, but I still find it very compelling. Great characters. You forget how many actors are in this movie. I mean, you got Barry Pepper, Ed Burns, Tom Hanks, Matt Damon, Tom Sizemore. I mean, even fucking Vin Diesel is in this movie. An early role for him, and he's really good. And I just love the storyline of them trying to get Private Ryan and get him back home because all of his brothers have been killed. Great movie with a phenomenal opening. Saving Private Ryan is my favorite from 1998. 1999. Now, I certainly could have given it to Fight Club, and I almost did. Fight Club is really good. It's kind of hard to explain why it's so good. I mean, the performances are great all the way around. Ed Norton, Brad Pitt, Helena Bonham Carter, even Meatloaf, rest in peace. Really good in this movie. It certainly plays on male angst and frustration and toxic masculinity very well, and somehow keeps you engaged from start to finish. It's very well paced and has a good end twist and then a great ending with a great message. So that was almost it. But my number one for 1999 has to go to The Sixth Sense. This movie is just a very disturbing and creepy and compelling thriller, supernatural horror thriller. Bruce Willis gives one of his best performances ever. Haley Joel Osment as the kid is phenomenal. His mom, played by Toni Collette, is really good. The scene between them in the car towards the end of the movie where they're talking about Toni Collette's mom is phenomenal. And of course, the end twist, which is one of the best end twists of all time. Now, does that twist make it a little bit less rewatchable? Does it make it a little bit of one-trick pony? A little bit, but I still find it a very compelling and well-done movie.
I see dead people walking around like regular people.
I don't see anything. Are you sure they're there?
2000. Speaking of great M. Night movies, I actually think Unbreakable is better than Sixth Sense. It's not my number one for this year, but I want to give a shout out to it because I think it has a better Bruce Willis performance and a better twist than Sixth Sense, and actually works better on rewatch, a little bit more rewatchable to me. And I don't think it relies as much on the twist as The Sixth Sense does. One of the most underrated movies ever, one of my favorite movies of all time. However, this came out in the same year as Gladiator, which is my number one movie for 2000 and also like a top 10 movie of all time for me. I mean, what can I say about Gladiator? It's got great action. It's got phenomenal performances. Russell Crowe is great, but Joaquin Phoenix's Commodus is one of the best villains in any movie ever. Super despicable. You just can't wait to see him die. The storyline is very compelling to where Russell Crowe's Maximus loses everything and becomes a gladiator, has to work his way back up in order to get revenge on Commodus. Super emotional, super engaging. I cry every time I watch this movie, every time I listen to the soundtrack or just watch the ending. Great stuff. I love his relationship with Commodus' sister, and I also love his friendship with Djimon Hounsou's character. So much great stuff in this movie, and there's much more to it than just a violent gladiator movie. It's not just an action movie. It's very emotional, very engaging, and it is a character study. It is an emotional character story, first and foremost. That's why I love Gladiator so much, and the ending is incredibly satisfying while also being incredibly sad.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legions, loyal servant to the true emperor, Marcus Aurelius.
2001. Now, my honorable mention is going to be Monsters, Inc., one of my favorite Pixar movies, possibly my favorite Pixar movie. This one's great. I don't exactly know how to explain what makes it so good, but it's super charming. Boo is a great character. Sully and Mike, two of the most likable Pixar characters. Great villains, with a twist of Waternoose. The animation is done really well, and the concept of these monsters scaring kids to, get their power is really cool. So much to like about this movie. But my number one for this year, and I might be cheating a little bit, and if this doesn't count, and this is actually a 2000 movie, I'll bump up Monsters, Inc. to my number one, and then this would in turn be probably my number 2 or 3 of 2000. That's Memento. It was released worldwide in 2001, so I'm counting it as a 2001 movie. I'm not exactly sure what its Oscar eligibility was, but I'm thinking since it didn't come out till like May, I'm going to count it as a 2001 movie. So technically it could be wrong, but for the sake of this list, that's what it's going to be. Again, if it doesn't count, Monsters, Inc. will be number one. But Memento it kind of falls to like the bottom half of my Nolan ranking, but it's still very, very good. Super compelling. Guy Pearce is great in the role, and the concept of, him having this memory problem. So the movie works its way backwards. So we're kind of almost put in his perspective. Like, we don't know exactly what's going on either. Then we get the big twist at the end as to what's really been going on this whole time. Just great stuff, and even still works on rewatch. The gimmick doesn't get tired after one watch, at least for me so far.
Since my injury, I can't make new memories. Everything fades. If we talk for too long, I'll forget how we started. Next time I see you, I'm not going to remember this conversation.
2002. I'm going to give an honorable mention to, again, one of the most underrated movies I've ever seen. One of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen, and that is Frailty. It is a movie about Bill Paxton, kind of indoctrinating his sons on this crusade where he claims to get this message from God, and he is killing these people who are actually demons. One of his sons is completely going along with it, one of them isn't, and the one that didn't go along with it is the one telling Powers Booth, this whole story about what happened, and McConaughey plays the older version of him. Several twists and turns throughout this movie, and they all work and they all build on top of each other. Rarely do you have a movie that has this many twists that all land and all make the previous twist better. I'm telling you, if you've never seen Frailty, one of the most underrated movies of all time, it is so, so good. But it's not quite my number one for that year. That goes to Minority Report. Minority Report is also super underrated. It's my second favorite Tom Cruise movie and my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. It's a great concept to where you get pre-crime, where they're stopping these murders before they happen, and then Tom Cruise's character himself gets accused of a murder, and he goes on the run and tries to figure out, what happened and who set him up and who's behind all this. Again, another movie that it can be very disturbing at times, really cool visuals, really cool concepts, great performances, and then another great twist that you don't see coming. Some people aren't a massive fan of the ending. That might be my only problem with the movie, but I was honestly okay with it. I thought the ending was earned in a certain sense.
Say something, Chief?
No. You're in a lot of trouble, John. I have a warrant in my pocket that says murder.
Don't run.
You don't have to chase me.
2003. This is a movie that I guarantee most of you watching this have not heard of, and that is Basic. And I don't know why so many people have not seen this movie, because it stars Samuel Jackson and John Travolta, and it's directed by John McTiernan, who directed Die Hard with a Vengeance, and Predator. So why didn't more people not know about this movie? It's kind of a mystery thriller where Travolta and Connie Nielsen's character are trying to figure out what happened, what caused the disappearance of Samuel Jackson's colonel, and they're interrogating these two people. And they keep, telling their own versions of the story, and we slowly uncover what really happened. Many, many twists throughout this movie. Some people argue that there's too many twists to even make sense. I liked it. I really enjoyed the ride throughout this movie, and I was super engaged. And I thought all the twists, including the ending one, worked. So this is a movie that I find incredibly underrated. And please, if you have a way to watch this movie, please do so.
Sergeant Nathan West leads the U.S. Special Forces' most elite unit.
My Rangers are warriors.
Deception is their most dangerous weapon.
My Rangers are gods.
2004 is going to be Collateral. I love Collateral. I am obsessed with this movie. It's my favorite Tom Cruise movie. Not only is it a great crime thriller with great action scenes and great gunplay and a super interesting plot line about Tom Cruise's character basically hijacking, kidnapping Jamie Foxx's character and forcing him to take him to all of his hits. It also has some of the best character development I've ever seen in any movie. The conversations between Tom Cruise's character and Jamie Foxx's character in the car, to where they kind of question each other's philosophies. So much great stuff there. And some people have a problem with the ending. I will fight you on that to the death. The ending makes total sense. I'm not going to get into specifics in case you haven't seen it, but so much to love about this movie. Very well paced, very intense, very compelling, great characters, great action. What's not to love about Collateral?
You full of shit. Oh, crap. I'm full of shit. You're a monument of it. You done bullshitted yourself. All I am is taking out the garbage, killing bad people.
Well, that's what you said.
You believe me?
2005 is going to go to Batman Begins. This was an easy one for me. There's some good movies this year, but Begins is incredible. It's my favorite superhero origin story of all time, and it just tells the origin of Batman in a way that we've never seen before, in a way that's more interesting. I like the non-linear storytelling at the beginning of the movie. And this is the only movie in the trilogy where it's really focused on Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne and Batman, and he's great in the role. I mean, the villains are good too. Liam Neeson and Cillian Murphy are great, and Cillian Murphy, the first time we see his Scarecrow, was super scary. Tom Wilkins's Falcone does great for, the role he's supposed to play in this movie. So much great stuff. Super compelling, and it's never boring before he becomes Batman. A lot of times in origin stories, you're kind of bored. Like, all right, let's get to the when he becomes a superhero. But you're engaged all the way through, and once he does finally become Batman, it's super satisfying. And the first scene we see him as Batman is so well done and great. And I love basically every aspect about this movie, even though I do prefer The Dark Knight. Batman Begins, by far and away my favorite movie of 2005.
What the hell are you? I'm Batman.
2006. Now, if this were last year, I would have given it to The Departed, which I love. It's in my top 10 of all time. Super compelling. It's my favorite Martin Scorsese movie. Super intense. It's about these two cops trying to uncover each other's identities. Many, many twists throughout, and it's a very much an anxiety-inducing, edge-your-seat movie, which I love. I don't love having anxiety in real life, but while I'm watching movies, it is actually something that I do kind of like. So an intense movie like this is something that's right up my alley. But I will actually give it to The Prestige, which is my second favorite Nolan movie. I think Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman both give possibly their best performance of all time. A lot of people shit on ScarJo in this movie. I think she's really good. We get a young Andy Serkis. David Bowie is even great. Michael Caine. Everyone in this movie is phenomenal, and it is a super compelling and engaging story about these dueling magicians trying to one-up each other, and has many twists throughout, and the ending twist especially is kind of a double twist, and it is one of the best twists I've ever seen in any movie. Super phenomenal. And the character journeys that we see from these two characters, the lengths that they'll go to try to beat each other, and then the themes of obsession throughout this movie is very, very prevalent. I love The Prestige. It's phenomenal. It's basically a perfect movie.
Was it good?
It was the greatest magic trick I've ever seen.
2007. This is a tough one. I'm going to give an honorable mention to No Country for Old Men. Great performances. Javier Bardem is one of the most terrifying villains of all time. It's a movie that I probably won't rewatch super often, but is still very interesting and has a lot going for it. Very well done. But I'm going to give it to Gone Baby Gone. This is a movie that I saw a couple years ago, and I don't remember it super well, but I remember it being a very interesting premise with great performances and multiple twists. And the end twist especially makes the movie much better. The movie that was already very engaging, and I was very interested to see, what direction it would take to try to figure out what happened. This woman's, baby gets kidnapped, and try to figure out what happened. And the answer that we get is very interesting and asks very difficult questions. So I'll just leave it at that. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But Gone Baby Gone is great.
If you see me coming, you better run, because I'm gonna lay you the fuck down. Easy.
2008. This is an easy one for me. It's A Dark Knight. It's my second or first favorite movie of all time. It's perfect. I mean, I've sung the praises of this movie so much, not necessarily on this channel, but Heath Ledger is one of the best villains of all time. Aaron Eckhart and his character arc is great. The arc that Bruce goes through in this movie, to where his morals get tested in this movie, is like, does Batman really make Gotham a better place, or does it just open the door for worse villains like the Joker? Every scene the Joker is in, the conversation he has with Batman in the interrogation, the conversation he has with Harvey at the hospital. You don't like him, you don't agree with what he's doing, but he also makes some really good points. The movie is very well paced. It is at its core a crime thriller. I mean, it's like Heat or some other mob movie, but it's also a Batman movie with the Joker, who is a ridiculous villain, but also fits into this movie and adds so much to it. But even without him, there's so much going on. Stuff that happens with Gary Oldman's Commissioner Gordon and the arc he goes through, feels bad about what happened to Harvey. The stuff at the end with Harvey and him and Batman is really, really good. Great themes in this movie. Great pacing. Great performances. Incredible score. What can I say about Dark Knight?
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
2009 is going to be Inglourious Basterds. This is a movie that I just watched for the first time a couple years ago, and damn, it is great. It is not quite my favorite Tarantino movie, but it is close. It's been creeping up on Pulp Fiction, because I think this one gets better on rewatch, and it has a more interesting story than Pulp Fiction does. The performance, Christoph Waltz This is his first feature film, at least in America, I think, and he's incredible. Brad Pitt is certainly very charismatic and enjoyable. They have kind of two different storylines going on, which are both very compelling, and then they converge at the end, which is one of the best endings of any movie ever. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but Tarantino takes some creative liberties and really shocks people with what they do with this ending. Great movie. So many great moments, so quotable, so many intense scenes. I mean, Tarantino builds tension like no one else. Like the opening scene with Christoph Waltz and talking to the guy in the house, and then the bar scene with Fassbender. Again, Inglourious is a movie I can sing the praises of for hours.
Once we're in enemy territory, as a bushwhacking guerrilla army, we're going to be doing one thing and one thing only. Killing Nazis.
2010 is going to go to my third favorite Nolan movie, which is also still my top 10 favorite movies of all time, which proves how much I love Nolan. Inception. This is one that is one of the most interesting and unique and creative premises of all time, and they do so much cool stuff with it. The visuals are phenomenal, the action is great, the performances, the score, but it also has a strong emotional core involving Cobb and his character arc and his relationship with his late wife and everything that happened there. Several twists throughout the movie. And the way that Nolan visualizes and executes this idea of going into someone's dreams and stealing ideas from them, and then he turns it into planting an idea in their head, incepting an idea in their head. Who could have come up with this? I mean, just such a cool movie. It is basically a perfect movie, and there's nothing like it.
3 layers down, dreams are going to collapse with the slightest disturbance.
Sedation. For sleep, stable enough to create 3 layers of dreaming.
2011 was close between two sports movies. The honorable mention is going to be Warrior, which I think is great. I mean, it's the best version of this type of movie. Phenomenal performances, super emotional, and it is very well paced. A great story with also great fight scenes involving the tournament, the MMA tournament. And you got, dueling brothers who you feel for both of them, and they both have their own journeys, and you sympathize with both of them, but only one of them can win. Great stuff there. The relationship with their dad. I can't, talk enough about how great Warrior is. However, I do like Moneyball a little bit better. I love Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill in this movie. Their dynamic is great. And as a massive baseball fan, I just love all the dialogue scenes in this movie talking about the ins and outs of, how they look at this data and how they're going to replace all of these players and how they completely change the game of baseball. And a lot of, people, most teams still use a lot of stuff that they used in this movie. Super compelling, even for someone who maybe might not be as big of a baseball fan as me. I've heard a lot of people say who are massive baseball fans that they love this movie because of the performances and the really, really good dialogue and pacing. So much to love about this movie. Moneyball is my favorite movie of 2011.
Billy, of the 20,000 notable players for us to consider, I believe that there is a championship team of 25 people that we could afford.
2012 has two great options for me. I'm going to give an honorable mention to Django Unchained. Super fun movie. It's Tarantino's take on a Western. It's a long movie, but it's also well-paced and compelling and has some of the best performances, from Christoph Waltz and DiCaprio, and Samuel Jackson is phenomenal. Jamie Foxx is great. The ending is super satisfying. I mean, it's Tarantino doing his Tarantino thing, and it's one of his best movies. But I'm going to give it to The Dark Knight Rises. I love this movie, and I don't understand the hate for it. I don't think the plot holes are nearly as bad as people say. I think you can find reasonable explanations for most of them. It certainly isn't paced quite as well as the other two Batman movies, but Bane is one of the best villains, of any movie ever. He just happens to be in a trilogy with another one of the best villains ever. The arc that Bruce has in this movie, we get some of the best stuff from Gary Oldman in this movie. Anne Hathaway's Catwoman is super sexy and badass and mysterious, and I love it. Awesome movie, and I love it every time I watch it. Don't understand the hate for this movie whatsoever.
Leave us.
No, you stay here. I'm in charge.
Do you feel in charge?
2013 was an easy pick for me. It's my favorite Denis Villeneuve movie. It is Prisoners. Wow. It's been a long time, admittedly, since I've seen this movie, but I just remember it being super compelling and emotional and intense, and you really feel for what Hugh Jackman's character is going through and his frustrations with the cops and not being able to find his daughter, and then what happens at the end with a little bit of a ambiguous ending there. Prisoners is great, and I really, really need to watch it again.
And every day, she's wondering why I'm not there to fucking rescue her. Do you understand that? Right. Me, not you. Not you, but me. Every day.
2014, holy shit, is this year stacked. There was so many options for this year. I mean, you got Winter Soldier, Gone Girl, Guardians of the Galaxy, Edge of Tomorrow, Whiplash, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Nightcrawler, but I ultimately had to give it to Interstellar. This movie is incredible, and it gets better on rewatch. I know a lot of people have problems with the ending. I like the ending. I think it fits the movie, and it is Nolan's both his most ambitious movie and most emotional. The stuff we get with McConaughey, watching the videos of, you know, his daughter after all these years, not many years for him, but many years for her. Some of the most emotional stuff in any Nolan movie or any movie ever. Combine that with the fact that it has incredible visuals, a very compelling premise, a couple twists here and there, and maybe my favorite movie score of all time. I love Interstellar. It's my favorite movie of 2014.
You once told me that when you came back, we might be the same age. And today I'm the age you were when you left.
2015, this was a tough one because I almost chose Spotlight, which is basically the best version of this type of movie. Very compelling, very relevant, very well-paced. It's a movie about people just kind of sitting around talking, but it's also super important, the stuff that they're trying to uncover and figure out and, you know, blow the whistle on. So you're interested in where this is going to go. But I ultimately had to give it to one of the most rewatchable movies of all time, Star Wars The Force Awakens. It still holds the record for a movie that I saw in the theater the most times. 5 times I saw this movie in theaters. I mean, what can I say? It's so much fun from start to finish. It's a little bit derivative of A New Hope, maybe, but I honestly think it did a lot of things better. The visuals are great. The pacing is great. The humor is well placed. I love the introduction of the new characters. Don't love where they went with them in the other 2 movies, but that's a totally different conversation. It's emotional and it needs to be emotional. Just a very fun roller coaster of a movie. The Force Awakens is awesome.
Traitor!
2016, there's a few movies at the top here that I could have gone with. I almost went with Arrival, which is a great sci-fi movie with great performances and a really interesting premise and great emotions and twists thrown in there, and really changes. It's a very unique movie. But I also almost went with Deadpool, which is also unique in its own right and very creative and hilarious and violent and awesome. But I had to go with my second favorite MCU movie, Captain America Civil War. I am obsessed with this movie ever since I saw it. Super intense, very emotional, very compelling. You know, you understand where both Cap and Tony are coming from, why they want to do what they want to do, why they feel the way they do about the Accords, and why they're against each other. It's a natural progression of those 2 characters given what they've gone through throughout the entirety of the MCU. And you also understand where Cap's coming from when it comes to Bucky and where Tony's coming from when it comes to that, you know, given what happened to his parents and stuff. And then you got Zemo, where he's completely sympathetic given what happened to him. So it's a movie about a bunch of people that you totally feel for where they're coming from, but they have to fight each other, and it's so intense, and you're worried, you know, is someone going to die? And the stakes, even though nobody actually dies in this movie, there are consequences from this movie that carry over to Infinity War, which ultimately lead to the Avengers losing in Infinity War.
What if this panel sends us somewhere we don't think we should go? What if there's somewhere we need to go and they don't let us? We may not be perfect, but the safest hands are still our own.
2017, again, has some very good options at the top. I could have gone with Logan, which is... I haven't seen all the X-Men movies, but it is certainly a great movie, you know, about kind of growing old and your time being done, but having to pass the torch to this new girl who is great in the movie. some of the best stuff from Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart I've ever seen. Super, super emotional. You also got Blade Runner 2049, which I liked much more than the original because I connected much more to the story and the characters, and I thought the emotions hit really hard in this movie. And on top of that, of course, you get the phenomenal direction and visuals and score. But I have to go with Thor Ragnarok. It's one of my favorite MCU movies. It is an absolute roller coaster. It is so much fun from start to finish. It's emotional. Again, kind of similar to Force Awakens. It's emotional when it needs to be. It's super funny when it needs to be. One of the funniest movies, honestly, I've ever seen. The score, the music, it's got a great arc from Thor. Hela's an awesome villain. Introduction of Valkyrie. So much to love about this movie. One of the best paced MCU movies. It never lets up. Big, huge grin on my face from start to finish.
That's what... Because that's what heroes do.
2018. I got a little bit of streak of MCU movies here. This is going to my favorite MCU movie, which is Avengers Infinity War. To me, this is the Empire Strikes Back of our generation. It is phenomenal. I mean, from having one of the greatest villains of all time in Thanos, you understand where he's coming from. He's compelling. He feels like he thinks he's the hero of his own story, even though you hate what he's doing. But all these heroes coming together and interacting with each other. There's well-placed humor. It's very emotional when it needs to be, very intense. The action is great. It's super well-paced. There's this impending sense of doom with Thanos, and you feel like, geez, how they're going to pull it off. And they don't. The ending, the villain wins. And it's one of the best and ballsiest endings of any movie I've ever seen, especially like a superhero movie like this. And of course, all these people are going to come back and, they're going to win in the end. It's not about that, though. It's about the journey of getting them back, which we experience in Endgame, and seeing this through the reactions of the characters. So that's why it didn't bother me that I knew they were coming back, because to me, it wasn't about that. Obsessed with this movie. I can watch it over and over and over. It does everything right.
I finally rest and watch the sunrise on a grateful universe. The hardest choices require the strongest wills.
2019, I'm actually going to break my streak of MCU movies. I almost went with Endgame, which is super satisfying. I don't think it's quite as good as Infinity War, because I don't think it's quite as well paced, and there's a few things in the second act that aren't amazing. But it also has one of the best final battles of any movie ever. This third act is probably the best hour, most satisfying, most thrill-inducing, get up and cheer stuff of any movie. Just incredible stuff. And the first hour is really good too, where we get all the, character stuff. And that doesn't work as well if we haven't been watching these characters and getting invested into them throughout all these years. That's why we can spend so much time with them, just sitting with their loss in the first one, and basically just have the first hour is basically straight up drama. And it works super well. We get some of the best stuff from Downey and Evans and Renner and ScarJo in this movie, and the ending, is very sad for the characters that are done, super satisfying and fitting endings to them, and then they also tease the future for other characters. So much love, but I gotta go with Ford versus Ferrari for my number one for 2019. It's really difficult to explain how great this movie is. I mean, the racing scenes are thrilling. It's so much fun. The characters are great, especially Christian Bale and Matt Damon. Their interactions, and it's less about Ford versus Ferrari as it is them versus the higher ups versus the corporate people who are trying to control everything, and they think they know best, even though it's clear throughout this movie that they don't. And then, screwing over Christian Bale during the race and everything. And there's a theme throughout this movie that racing is not all fun and games, and they show the serious side and the dangerous side of it as well. There's some great interactions between Bale and his son. Emotional when it needs to be. I love Ford vs. Ferrari. It is basically the perfect version of this type of movie.
Look out there. Out there is the perfect lap. No mistakes.
2020, not much to choose from. I believe I've only seen like 10 movies from 2020, but I'm going to go with The Gentleman. The Gentleman is my favorite Guy Ritchie movie. To me, it's him at his best. Well-paced, all awesome performances all around, especially Colin Farrell and Matthew McConaughey and Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant is having such a good time in this movie. It is so clever, so funny. The dialogue is super sharp. The movie is compelling and intricate, and you gotta pay attention because there's a lot going on, but it also comes together very well at the end. I can watch this movie over and over and over. The Gentleman is great.
Now, you may be able to buy your man sausage for that, but to me it just looks rude at breakfast. You're out of touch.
2021. Now, it's funny because for the longest time it was A Quiet Place 2, which is a very well done follow-up to the original. Super intense. Some of my favorite creature designs. Great character stuff. I like the inclusion of Cillian Murphy's character. And then you also got No Way Home, which is a super emotionally satisfying experience. Tom Holland gives his best stuff in the entire MCU. Of course, you get Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire as well. You get all the villains. Willem Dafoe is phenomenal. A great emotional arc for Tom Holland's character. Great interactions between him and Garfield and Tobey, where they kind of remind him of, why he's Spider-Man and why they do what they do. And, this is what we do. That's their thing. The third act is super satisfying, and the ending is very emotional and very well done. But I got to give this to a movie that I just recently saw, and that's CODA. CODA is phenomenal. I can't believe how great this movie was. It's just a movie that I was very, very invested in, and it's so well done. The main character is the only person in her family who can hear, so we're kind of very sympathetic to her situation, to where she's trying to decide if she wants to stay with her family and help them, or if she wants to go off to college and do her own thing. She's got so much on her plate, and it certainly almost makes me feel secondhand anxiety. Like, man, I really feel for this girl. And she has very difficult decisions to make, getting pulled in so many different directions. Super emotional, especially if you know what I'm talking about, if you've seen the movie, the singing scene. A movie that is very, very well done. It's hilarious when it needs to be, very emotional when it needs to be, and I love it. This is a movie that I can't talk about enough. All the characters are great, and it is super charming, got a ton of heart. CODA is my favorite movie of last year.
His,
2022 so far. Maverick is great, and I just filmed my Maverick review. I'm not sure which I'm going to post first. Probably that. But Maverick surprised the hell out of me. It was awesome. However, I got to go with Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is one of the best movies I've seen in theaters in years. It absolutely blew me away. It is a very creative and unique concept. The way they utilize the multiverse is really cool, and probably my favorite version of the multiverse in any movie I've ever seen. It's very, very emotional. It has these very deep themes about, the path not taken, and it's got some great messages and great characters, great character arcs. It is also happens to be one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, and some humor that you would never be able to think of on your own. Like, who the hell came up with this stuff? So all of that adds up to one of the best movies I've seen in years, and easily my favorite movie of this year so far. Oof. That was tough, and it took me several takes to, certain years I had to restart and do, but I'm through this, and this was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to talk about some of my favorite movies of all time. Really cool idea. Again, thanks to Sean for the idea. And if you enjoy my content, like, subscribe, notification bell, comment down below. What are your favorite movies for every year that you've been alive? I would love to see your lists. So do that, and stick around. I got a lot of cool stuff coming, so I'll see you soon.